The latest graphics card to be released from NVIDIA is their GTX 1660, and this actually differs in quite a few more ways than just your classical CUDA core count compared to the 1660 Ti. First of all, they're using GDDR5 memory, which has significantly less memory throughput speeds than the GDDR6 that they're using on the 1660 Ti. Furthermore, there is quite a big difference in price. We're looking at $280 MSRP for the Ti variant versus $220 for the 1660. If you're in Australia, the cheapest I can find it for is 365 Aussie. NVIDIA have also dropped the CUDA core count down from 1536 to 1408, so roughly an 8.4% reduction. However, compared to the 1066 gigabyte, it's actually an increase of 10%, going from 1280 again to those 1408 CUDA cores. However, of course, with the Turing architecture, you do get some improvements like better IPC in that it'll process more for the amount of power it's consuming, as we saw at the 1660 Ti review. However, since it is using GDDR5, this card, and we'll show you the power consumption results straight away, is using roughly the same as its big brother variant, which was kind of a little bit disappointing to see. However, more on that later. Let's roll those gaming benchmarks where I'm comparing it against an RX 574 GB, RX 588 GB, GTX 1066 GB, and also the 1660 Ti. Now, I did decide to leave out the RX 590 because I feel at its current price point, the 1660 Ti has already slated. But let's roll those numbers for you guys. So I recorded this outro and then I went back and I looked at the graphs because I actually hadn't manually made the graphs up yet. And then after I did that, I was like, damn, I need to go back and re-record this outro segment of what happened with the 1660 here, because when I saw those numbers, it was clearly outclassing the GTX 1060 by a long shot, and it was beating the RX 582 and the RX 570, of course. That's kind of a different league. We'll talk about that a little bit later. But in terms of its main competitors that it's replacing, the 1060 and the RX 580, it's doing a good job of beating those two cards comfortably. And this is coming in at $220 MSRP. So that's what you can get it for on the shelves right now. When I looked at Amazon.com or Newegg, that's what you can pick these up for. This model here, the Gigabyte 3-fan OC, is actually about $20 more. And in Australia, it's about 30 Aussie dollars more than the cheapest model you can get. And honestly, I really like what Gigabyte have done with not just this card, but also the 2000 series in general, where they're offering just a simple, clean aesthetic and performance. When we look at this card in particular, out of the box, it came with very aggressive overclock going up to 1980 megahertz in a 26-degree ambient environment. We managed to boost it past 2.1 gigahertz, so this thing was soaring ahead. Now the GDDR5, I'm willing to ignore that because of the $220 price tag and how well it performs in games in the real world. Like Apex Legends, it was pretty much catching the 1660 Ti. So if all you want to do is play Apex Legends and get a brand new graphics card, this is definitely going to be the card to get. I guess NVIDIA with the latest driver 419 has somehow got that adaptive shading working better in this game, because these cards were definitely kicking it as opposed to the GTX 1060, for example, which lost to the RX 580 in that title. But going through some of the other numbers, when we overclocked this thing manually, it did catch up to the 1660 Ti a lot of the times. But in the case of the Ti variant, of course, you can overclock that, but I do like to throw that in there for guys who like to get the most out of their graphics cards. And this thing here had no problems whatsoever staying quiet whilst it was overclocked. Looking at the temperatures and also noise, we had here at 60% fan speeds, maximum temperature of 61 degrees. Move over to 80% fan speeds, the temperatures then dropped to 58 degrees, but the noise was creeping up, but it was still bearable. And then of course 100% goes over 50 decibels, and the temperatures dropped down to 54 degrees. Auto on this card was a little bit weird. It was coming 5% under 60%, but it was 4 degrees higher. So my recommendation would be to either set a manual fan curve with the max point of 60%, or of course just manually lock in 60% itself, since it was very quiet on the ears. Though going through some of the other features in relation to this card itself, you got 3 80mm fans on the back, you got 3 DisplayPort outs, as well as a HDMI 2.0. It weighs in at 675 grams, is 282mm wide, is a dual slot in depth, and also the length is 113mm. On the side, you've got the Gigabyte logo, which lights up in RGB. You can control that via software if you wish to, and just beside that, you've got a single 8-pin connector. Though the backplate is something of curiosity, since it is made of plastic, it's not going to do absolutely anything to help with thermals, but of course it does add to the aesthetic and it will help combat GPU sag. But when it all comes down to it, the GTX 1660 is actually a very solid card, despite it having its limitations with GDDR5, and that does come out in some titles versus the GDDR6 variant on the 1660 Ti. It is very good value for money, and especially if you want to manually overclock these cards, they are going to perform extremely well in titles for the dollar. Something else worth mentioning as well is it does have the NV encoder, the latest update that's the same as the RTX series cards. So in other words, if you're a streamer on a budget, this is definitely going to be a good option if you want to get into streaming and still have good FPS, but not have to fork out so much on the CPU side, as well as getting so much RAM. But now here's where we relate back to the RX 580, 570, and also the GTX 1060. Now the 1060 itself, I think it's pretty much irrelevant after the release of this card. You've got everything NVIDIA here, but better, especially on the new market. In terms of the used market, I really can't find any of these up for sale for a decent price. Though the RX 570, and in particular the 570, that is abundant at the moment on the used market, and you can get them for so cheap. I've been picking up a lot of them personally, but of course that card is in a different league compared to the 1660. The RX 580, I haven't really found many of them for sale on the used market, though in terms of the new market, you can get them for under 200 USD. So that's an option if you like AMD cards, but in terms of new market cards, this is definitely the best value out there at the moment. So this card impressed me a lot when I started jotting all the numbers I wrote down into graphs, and then seeing all those bars come out, I was like, damn, this thing actually is pulling ahead by a lot compared to the RX 570, 580, and the 1060. Anyway guys, that about concludes it for this review. If you guys enjoyed this one, then be sure to hit that like button. Let us know in the comment section below as well what you think of this card. And also, are you in the market for a used card or a new card? Love reading your thoughts and opinions as always. And if you enjoy the content that much, you may wish to consider subscribing, hitting that bell icon, or if you want to get the latest scoop before it even gets to YouTube, then be sure to check us out on Instagram, TechYesCity, and I'll catch you in another tech video very soon. Peace out for now. Bye.